insightful and informative technology talks for the U.S. Defense Industrial Base.
So a little bit about me. I've been IT security manager in the Defense Industrial Base for quite a while now. Been working in this industry for a bit. Um, what I like to do in the Cyber Patriot coach side ties in with basically my one of my core tenets of you know who I am is giving back to the community. Cyber Patriot is a cybersecurity training competition. It's put on by the Air Force Academy. I've been teaching that for 5 years now, 6 years coming up soon. Teaching homeschoolers, grades 6 through 12, about cybersecurity, trying to get them interested in the field. And so I naturally have a lot of desire to give back to the community, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come on here today, share some of my experiences with the community and help learn. I don't believe in gatekeeping. I believe in trying to get everybody to the same level of knowledge and help out wherever I can.
That's awesome. I feel exactly the same way. And I loved that. I didn't realize that Cyber Patriot Coach was like an actual organization. That is so cool that you're doing there.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of fun. I've actually gotten a lot of kids that had no interest in cybersecurity beforehand to learn about it and have really a good time. I finally got one of my kids interested this past year, and so now my upcoming high school sophomore might finally have an idea what he wants to do with his life, and that's going to be following in my footsteps, I believe.
Sweet. So, we met about a year ago at a conference for CMMC, and you were telling and sharing a story about how you accepted a position with a company, a brand new position, knowing that you were stepping into a DIBCAC audit in 7 weeks.
Yes. So
Okay.
I consider myself one of the biggest fools because this is actually it was the second DIBCAC High audit that I'd been through. So I had been through one at a previous company, and this company knew they had one coming up, and they weren't ready for it, and said, "Hey, we'd love you to join us. And by the way, let's get ready in 7 weeks." And I said yes, knowing what that was going to be like for the first, 7 weeks of my time there. And it was a lot of work to say the least. So one good thing is we have an excellent IT team already. We had one problem though is our SSP was about a year and a half out of date. So all the work they had done since then wasn't reflected in any documentation. So as I'm learning the company, understanding the tools, understanding the people and their roles there, I'm having to document it all in a way that we can show how we are compliant with 800-171. So that was a real big kind of leap. As you imagine, you come into a company, you got to learn who all the different players are. So we're a 650 person company. We got like 40 people in our IT team, and trying to understand and build relationships with these people while I'm just constantly asking them questions about what they do on a daily basis was definitely interesting.
Wow. Okay. So, if I'm understanding correctly, it wasn't like, you walked in and the company was, just hadn't done anything at all, and you had 7 weeks and you just got everything compliant in 7 weeks. It was that they had already been doing work for a long time to prepare themselves. So they already had, if they had any remediation they had to do, anywhere that was out of alignment, that they already did all that work a long time ago, but then didn't kind of maintain the program after they kind of rushed to get compliant. Does that sound right?
Yeah, they've been tracking 800-171 compliance for quite a few years and working towards it, trying to get the right tools and processes in place. But the fact that they didn't have the documentation up to date was the biggest problem we ran into. Being able to prove to the auditor. Because that's what the DIBCAC High is all about, is coming in and showing that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing.
So it can't just be like, they come in and they say, so are you doing regular maintenance? And you say yes, and they say okay.
Yeah, and that's where the DIBCAC program came from. So originally it was all self-attestation. They said companies, "Hey, are you following all 110 controls?" And they said, "Sure we are." And then they had some breaches and stuff. They're like, "Well, we think companies may not really be understanding what's supposed to happen. So let's go out and The good thing about DIBCAC is that's not really a pass fail. It's an audit. It gives you an idea of how well you're doing. Um,
Hmm.
DIBCAC went out and they started talking to companies, and they're like, you really understand about maybe 25% of what you're supposed to be doing. You're not doing the rest of this stuff that you don't understand what you're not doing. And for the most part, I don't believe it was intentionally, negligence. I think it was just the level of work you have to do to be compliant is a lot, and you have to really dive into some of these regulations and read these huge documents. I am a nerd enough that I have read 800 and 800 a way too many times. Um, I say, thank Ron Ross at night for putting this together. Um, but yeah, not everybody is kind of that crazy as I am. Many others.
You and me both, man. You and me both. Um, and actually, I think like the CMMC Level 2 assessment guide is like my Bible, right? I mean, like, anyway. So when you were saying that about how it's a lot of work, and even though you were doing a lot of the right things, I was thinking about there are, I've seen so many companies out there trying to sell like an in a box solution, like CMMC in a box or compliance in a box for this. I mean, is it really possible to just buy a solution and get compliant, even if maybe you try to put the information you have to protect in that little box? I mean, I understand in a lot of organizations, it is the entire enterprise, and maybe that's not. But tell me what you think from your experience.
So there's two issues I see with the compliance in a box solution. The first is that really 800 compliance, and then in the future CMMC, it's not solely an IT problem. There are requirements in there as far as HR and onboarding. So when someone joins the company, how do you make sure they have the right permissions? When somebody leaves the company, how are you disconnecting them? When someone changes roles in the company, how are you making sure that they have access to what they need and they lose access to things they shouldn't have anymore?
Hmm.
And generally, IT gets told after someone, leaves the company or when
Yeah.
someone's coming. Generally, in most companies, you don't get told when someone transfers positions. So that's a big issue. There's training, insider threat training specifically, CUI handling training. That's all required in there. And generally, IT is not the one who's running with that. One of the ones that tends to trip up companies a lot is there's a requirement to review anything that gets posted on a public website. So you're thinking of like your company's public website, not like you're not monitoring your employees to make sure they're not posting CUI on Facebook. Um, but what you got to do there is you have to have mechanisms in place for when someone posts something to your website, make sure that if there's some technical information going up there, it's not CUI. And then you have to do an ongoing review of that website. And generally, IT is not in most companies the webmaster. They may maintain the system, but you usually have a marketing team or social media team that will maintain the website. And that's where you have to train them and they have to have that understanding. So the first issue with compliance in the box is not solely an IT problem. There's a lot of issues that have to be done by other groups in the company. The other problem with compliance in a box solutions, or like trying to do everything in a little enclave, is that many companies just simply can't work there. Now, I mean, if what you're doing as a company is you're creating PowerPoints or Word documents, great, that works fine. But most of my time has been spent in engineering or manufacturing companies. And when you've got, a 30-ton piece of equipment where you are pouring molten metal to make missile fins or something like that, a forging house or a finishing house, anything like that, you're doing 3D printing. How are you going to get the data from this compliance in a box solution over to a machine that's actually doing the work, that's building a part? Or if you're an engineer, how are you going to be able to run SolidWorks to do 3D design in a compliance as a box solution? It's really hard to be able to translate your work you're doing on the engineering or manufacturing side into a solution which is enclaved off away from everything else.
Okay, that makes sense. And if I'm thinking about this a little bit more, especially when you're talking about things like personnel, like HR kinds of things, web, and then the requiring, like DIBCAC wants to see, in an assessment, they're going to want to see proof of those things. Then what it sounds like to me is that there would be a requirement for some kind of documentation. Like, where is your process, your written process for how you are showing us that you're checking those websites? Or for human resources, like, where's your SOP or checklist for onboard, or SOP or checklist for transfer? So when you were talking about a lack of documentation when you came in, it wasn't just the SSP that had to be updated. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely right. So for me, we have our SSP, which talks about all those 110 controls, but it will reference other documents as well. So we have our acceptable use policy, training people what they can and are not allowed to do. So that's one policy we're referencing. So we have to make sure that's up to date. As this is being recorded, this is right after the TikTok ban came out. So we just had to update our AUP, tell employees, guess what? You can't go to TikTok anymore. Doesn't matter if you're using a personal device that's enrolled in our MDM. It's still not allowed. It's a government decision. So you have to have this kind of updates. You're thinking that has nothing to do with 800 You're right, but it does have to do with your other contractual requirements. So we had to push that out. We have a policy manual. So it basically talks through some of our IT policies. We don't want to put that within the SSP because the SSP is a fairly static document. As things change in our infrastructure, we will change the SSP, but our policy document is a lot more, it changes more often. So like, oh, we're changing from this tool to that tool, or we decided, like maybe in Office 365, some of the screenshots have changed how we're doing things. So generally, the SSP is for the compliance team, but the policy document is for the infrastructure team as they're doing their jobs. Here's how you go through and do some of that. We also have some processes. So HR has a written process for onboarding and offboarding and transfers. We have a written process around how we actually are doing the website review. So okay, here's a process that we have to follow. That's something we have to have there to show we are doing it. And then we also have to have the proof basically of all that stuff. So
Right.
one of the requirements that most people just totally miss is that you have to do a regular review of your public facing website. So
Hmm.
once a year we have one of our executives go through, review the data on the website and confirm that yes, there is no CUI on it.
So, you know, in when I work with organizations, and it sounds like that's sort of what you're talking about right now. When I work with them, I help them to establish, I could call it like a compliance actions cadence, like things that have to happen on a regular basis, because it's not like you would end up. You're lucky you came into an organization that had already done a lot of work, and maybe was not documenting things, but doing a lot of the stuff still. Like there was the tribal knowledge of people doing the thing. So that doing the thing does need to be documented, first of all, like when you're going to do the things and what things you're going to do. So clearly you've documented that. So how did you document that? And then how do you keep yourself on that cadence, and what kinds of things do you do?
Yep. So in 800 what I looked at there is everywhere that it basically talked about the words defined or identified or specified, and where
Yep.
we had defined how often we were doing things. So like baselines, we have in our SSP, and our policy says we're going to review our baselines every year. So okay, so there's one thing that we're supposed to do on an annual basis. Every year we're doing a baseline. Every year we're doing a tabletop exercise. Some stuff is more often than that. So what I did was I basically put all those dates in the SFP of the times when we're supposed to be doing things into an Excel spreadsheet. I'm a huge Excel junkie, so I have Excel spreadsheets of like my budgeting, my spending going back 20 years. Because again, huge nerd, huge Excel nerd. Have so much fun with it. I know everybody gives me that look like, what the heck? But I can tell you what my electric bill was 20 years ago, a couple houses ago. But so basically, I use Excel to track that. So I'm like, okay, so this item this annual review of our website, it has to be done every 365 days. Here's the date it was last done. Compare that to today's date. Are we at a red, yellow, or green state? If we're green, okay, I don't have to worry about it. If we're yellow, it's telling me, hey, we're getting close to time to have to do it again. And if we're red, then I'm like, oh boy, we're past the time where we're supposed to be doing this. We are out of compliance at this point. We need to make sure that we are doing this and getting it back in compliance. So I found that is a really good way to track those items that need to be done on a regular basis. And then make sure that, again, as I'm doing these, I create some kind of documentation, something that shows that, yes, I've done this. Even if, so like for the annual review, basically our CTO puts a one-page letter together saying, on this date, I reviewed our website, we have no CUI on it. And he does a digital signature on it. So there I have proof that he has done that, he signed off on it and said, yes, we're in good shape.
So I love that idea of the spreadsheet for the cadence because, when we work with organizations, we have sophisticated ticketing systems and they can raise tickets for things like maintenance on that program, whatever we decide the cadence is going to be. But basically, you don't have to do something that's that complex. You can, as long as you know what it is that you're going to do, you could do something as simple as a spreadsheet and, have like, I wish I had the amazing Excel skills that you seem to have, but I know that it can do things like that. Whenever those dates are coming up, change colors automatically and reminds you of the things that you need to do next, and then to go document them when you do them. So, what are some of the kinds of things that you have on your spreadsheet that you're doing on a regular basis? Like, it doesn't have to be exhaustive, but
Yeah.
give us some ideas.
Baselines are one of the big things. So, all the different technology we have in place, we have to have a baseline for each of the different types of technology. Firewalls, clients, servers, any of those things. So we have a line item for each of those. Have we done this? Things like the training. So um, when was the last time we updated our training plan? Even if we don't need to change the training, even if it's 2-year-old training, but it's still good, we still need to go through and look at our training and say, is this still good enough? Does it tell people about insider threats? Does it explain them well enough? Do we want to make any changes to it? It could be as simple as, oh, we have this person's name listed on our training, but that person's no longer here. Let's update the name, even if the data is still good. You're at least checking it on a regular basis. Things like an IR plan. So we have an incident response plan. Are we testing it on a regular basis? So we do tabletop exercises. When's the last time we did one? Um, when's the last time we updated the incident response plan? If we had an incident 6 months ago, realized, oh, there's a step missing out of there. Have we updated the plan? At least reviewing those things on a regular basis. And then our acceptable use policy. We have the plan to review that on an annual basis. Does it still list everything that's not allowed or is allowed? Are there changes we have to make? And of course, your SSP itself, you need to update on a regular basis. Even if nothing changes in your environment, you still want to make sure, oh, does everything match up with reality? And my SSP lists a number of people, the contacts in it to be able to, know who to contact in the event that you have any questions on specific technology. Well, as over a year, we may have people come and go out of the company. Have you gone and updated that?
Nice. Thank you for sharing some of those things. I'm sure there's a long list, though. Um,
There it is. And we're going to say it's all green right now, but it's beautiful.
I
Notice
love
I am
it.
not sharing it with you to prove me. You're just going to have to take my word for it.
Well, I believe you, but it's the assessors that we have to prove things to, right, Jake?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, do you have any final thoughts? Any other words of wisdom? If there are other contractors right now who are listening to this, and you've already shared some really great tips and tricks to take away, but any kind of final words to the people who are listening?
Yeah, so the two big things I think that a lot of people get wrong is that it is an IT problem and that you can go solve it by yourself. And you really can't. You gotta have support from the leadership, the executives in your company. You gotta build
Amen.
those relationships with people inside your company. You can't tell HR, hey, do this when you hire a new person. That's never going to work. I'm a very collaborative kind of person. So I try to build those relationships early on in the company to say, hey, we need to change how we're doing something here on the HR side. So really understanding that it's not something that you as an IT person or IT security person can push through. The other thing that I hear of is that, well, CMMC is not happening now. We don't have to worry yet. CMMC is going to be canceled. We don't have to worry until 800 171 revision 3 comes out. If you're worried about this right now, 800 171 is in your contract. You are expected to be compliant with it now. You cannot just put everything on a POAM and say, I'm good. I created an SSP and everything is going to be closed out within 5 years. That is not what the government is expecting from you at this point. They're expecting you to have done all these 110 things. They're expecting you to read 800 171A and look at the 320 assessment objectives. And yes, that is the kind of person I am. I have the numbers memorized at this point. Um, you,
Jake,
you,
I'm sorry. I just thought of something. Tell me if I'm right. So like I've seen businesses out there who say that they help with compliance and they say things like, we get you compliant in 2 weeks or we get you compliant in 30 days. And like you and I both know that there's no way to be able to implement all these controls and the documentation in 2 weeks or 30 days. I mean, you already had a really good fit company and it still took you 7 weeks to be able to just get documentation up to standard. Um, so is that what these companies are doing? Are they saying, here's a POAM and an SSP for where you are right now and you're compliant?
that is what some of these companies are doing. Yeah, they're saying all you have to do is just put it on a POAM and you're fine. And
Wow.
I can tell you if DIBCAC comes in and asks you and you show them a POAM and they're saying, okay, you have, 100 out of these 110 not done. When are you going to be complete? And you tell them 5 years, they're going to tell you that is not okay
Wow.
at all. I have heard that DIBCAC has referred a couple companies. I think it's the Department of Justice when they refuse to share their information with them because under your contract you're supposed to be doing this now, and if you're claiming that you're doing something but you're really not, you're going to get in trouble. And this is
Wow.
not to be a scare tactic, not to say that every company in the defense industrial base is going to get sued, but you do have a contractual obligation at this point to be working towards compliance. And I can tell you that, even with the work that we did, we weren't 100, we didn't have a 110 score at the end of our DIBCAC High. There were some things that they found were like, oh, okay, we didn't interpret it that way. We understand where you're coming from with the interpretation. Okay, we got to fix that. Those kinds of things happen. And basically, what DIBCAC does is, okay, well, here's the things that you should have on your POAM. When do you think you're going to have them done? They kind of give you a time frame to say when this is going to be done. And then when they will put that in their system and they will put a reminder on their calendar. And if you say, I'm going to be done in 6 months, they will call you in 6 months and say, okay, so are you done? Have you finished everything? And if you say yes, then they're going to come back and look at those things that you didn't close out according to them the first time. And then they'll reevaluate basically those ones that were missing. Now, if they call you back and you say, yeah, no, I haven't done any of my POAM items, it's another 6 months. They're not going to be really thrilled about that. They want to help you get compliant, and if you're not even trying, that's a big problem in their eyes.
Wow. Okay. Those are some really, really good things to share. And I appreciate your time today. I'm so glad that I got to meet you last year and keep doing such a good job, not only for your company, but thank you for helping to secure our nation and our nation's secrets with the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for being so open to help other organizations to get secure and compliant so that they too can help secure our country and the warfighter.
Thank you for having me on here. I'm very glad to share information and big fan of the DibTech Talk series.